What if the most powerful being in the universe gave humanity a message but only a few truly understood it? Hidden beneath layers of time, translation, and tradition lies a truth that could change your life forever. Are you ready to see what's been concealed for centuries? Welcome to the Bible Revealed, where ancient mysteries meet divine revelation. In this channel, we dive deep into Scripture, peeling back centuries of interpretation to rediscover what God really said down and why it still matters today. If you're hungry for truth, insight, and unshakable faith, you're in the right place. Let's uncover what was always meant to be revealed. In the beginning, the Garden of Eden was not merely a location, it was a realm, a sacred dimension where heaven and earth intertwined. Here man walked in unbroken communion with the Creator. There was no veil between the natural and the divine. The boundaries of time, pain, death, and limitation did not exist, for the presence of God was the atmosphere itself. Adam was not a primitive being. He was not caveman-like, nor naive in the sense we often imagine. He was a being of divine design, crafted not only from dust, but imbued with the breath of God. That breath, the Ruach in Hebrew, wasn't just air, it was spirit, life force, intelligence. Adam bore the imago Dei, the image of God, not as a mere reflection, but as a living carrier of divine authority and intention. His soul was illuminated, his understanding pure, his will aligned with heaven. He was placed in Eden, which means delight. But Eden was more than a garden, it was a sanctuary. It was the prototype of the tabernacle to come, the sacred space where man and God cohabited. The trees, the rivers, the creatures all pulsed with spiritual resonance. And in the midst of that garden were two trees unlike any other, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. One tree offered immortality, the other offered something far more dangerous: awareness, autonomy, the choice to define reality independently from God. God gave Adam dominion over the earth, naming rights over the animals, and the commission to tend the garden. He lacked nothing. There was no shame, no fear, no toil, no sickness. His relationship with Eve, formed from his very side, was untainted by lust or pride or selfishness. They were naked and unashamed, because there was no distortion in how they perceived themselves or each other. Theirs was a love that flowed from divine harmony. But Eden was not unguarded. In Genesis 2, we read that God placed man in the garden to work it and take care of it. The word used for take care is shema, which also means to guard. Why would Adam need to guard Eden against what? This detail hints at a cosmic reality. Eden was not isolated from the great war of the heavens. Somewhere beyond the garden, rebellion had already erupted. The serpent, referred to later in Revelation as that ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan, had already fallen. Cast down from the heights of heaven, he was not yet bound in chains, but still roaming, still speaking, still seducing. The presence of the tree of knowledge itself was not a trap, it was a test. God never designed Eden to be a cage, but a place of free will. For love without choice is not love at all. Adam and Eve were created with agency, not to be enslaved, but to be sons and daughters, rulers under God's kingship. The tree of knowledge was not forbidden because knowledge was evil. It was forbidden because knowledge apart from God, disconnected from divine wisdom, would lead to ruin. Imagine this for a moment. Humanity was created to be stewards of heaven on earth. Adam was the first priest, and Eden was the first temple. Every act of naming, every walk in the cool of the day with God, every interaction with creation, these were sacred acts. There was no anxiety, no confusion, no spiritual blindness. The glory that would later radiate from Moses' face when he met God was likely the daily condition of Adam's being. But there was something they did not know, something they had not yet experienced. It was not a lack, but a form of protection. They did not know evil. They had not yet been awakened to pain, shame, or deception. Their innocence was not ignorance, it was purity. So why was the serpent even allowed in? Because true obedience cannot exist without the possibility of disobedience. Love cannot be proven unless it faces a rival. Trust cannot be genuine unless it has an alternative. Eden was perfect, but not final. It was a beginning, not a destination. God's desire was for Adam and Eve to choose him continually, not as automatons, but as image bearers, with full awareness of their role in the divine story. The serpent's appearance was not random. His timing was strategic. He waited, not for weakness, but for the opportunity to plant a question, not a blatant lie, but a subtle twist. He did not present himself as a demon, but as a creature of wisdom. The Hebrew word for serpent nakash is rooted in meanings that include to shine and to enchant. It is possible that the serpent once appeared glorious, captivating, even beautiful. Evil rarely presents itself as evil, it disguises itself as illumination. The stage was set, two human beings, fashioned in glory, walking in perfection yet not yet tested. A tree that could grant access to something beyond their current state. A voice, ancient and cunning, ready to offer a shortcut to divinity. And a creator who gave them everything except this one thing. What was man's true state before the fall? It was uncorrupted sovereignty, divine intimacy, limitless potential, held in balance by trust in God. They were not gods, but they were meant to reign with God. They were not meant to know evil not by experience. They were meant to walk with wisdom, but wisdom grounded in fear of the Lord, not independent assertion of will. The tragedy of the fall was not just in breaking a rule, it was in breaking a relationship. The loss was not just Eden, it was the presence. What the serpent offered, we will explore in the next part. But before that, let us sit in the weight of what was lost, because only by grasping the beauty of what was can we understand the horror of what came next. The meeting of Melchizedek and Abraham, a theological earthquake. As Abraham returned victorious from rescuing Lot, something completely unexpected happened. Out of nowhere, a mysterious figure emerged, Melchizedek, king of Salem and priest of God Most High, without introduction or backstory. The biblical narrative in Genesis 14:18-20 simply inserts his appearance. He brings out bread and wine, blesses Abraham, and in return receives a tithe, 1/10 of all the spoils. And then, just as suddenly, he vanishes from the narrative. But what seems like a passing detail is actually a theological earthquake. First, there's the symbolism. Bread and wine. Sound familiar? Centuries before Jesus sat at the Last Supper with his disciples, Melchizedek brings these very elements, foreshadowing the body and blood of Christ. This has led many scholars and mystics alike to wonder, was this man merely a or was he something far more divine, a Christophany, a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ himself? Secondly, his dual role, both king and priest, was unheard of in ancient Israelite tradition. In fact, the Mosaic law strictly separated the kingship from the priesthood. Kings came from Judah, priests came from Levi, but Melchizedek was both, and that shook the foundations of everything the Israelites would later build their identity upon. He was a ruler of righteousness and also the ruler of Salem, which means peace, making him literally the king of peace. These are not coincidences. In the book of Hebrews, the Apostle Paul goes on to describe Melchizedek in terms so exalted they can't be ignored. He is said to be without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life. Resembling the Son of God, he remains a priest forever. This description is not casual, it's deliberate. It's declaring that Melchizedek, whether a man or divine manifestation, existed outside the structures of time, genealogy, and death, the very things that define all human life. Now, here's where it gets even deeper. Melchizedek didn't just bless Abraham. Abraham, the patriarch of Israel, the father of the nations, the covenant bearer, gave him This act of giving 1/10 of all spoils is an act of submission. It's not just generosity, it's acknowledgement of spiritual superiority. And in the Jewish world, Abraham is at the very top of the hierarchy. If Abraham bows to someone even symbolically, that person must stand above the covenant line. This suggests Melchizedek belongs to a higher spiritual order than the entire Levitical priesthood that would later descend from Abraham. That's why in Psalm 110, a messianic psalm quoted repeatedly in the New Testament, David prophesies of a coming king who will be a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. This was revolutionary. The Messiah would not be a Levitical priest, but one after Melchizedek's mysterious lineage. He would combine priesthood and kingship. He would not need animal sacrifices or temple rituals. His priesthood would be eternal, outside of genealogy, and appointed by God, not law. And who fits that role? Jesus Christ. He was from the tribe of Judah, not Levi. He was never a temple priest. And yet, in his death and resurrection, he became the eternal mediator between God and man. He offered himself once for all. He brought a covenant not written on stone but on human hearts. He reintroduced bread and wine, not as mere nourishment, but as a new covenant in his blood. And most of all, like Melchizedek, He reigns as both King of righteousness and King of peace. So then, is Melchizedek a mere shadow, a forerunner, a divine prototype, or was he more an appearance of the divine among men long before Bethlehem? One thing is certain: the Bible is not just history, it's mystery, prophecy, and revelation. And in Melchizedek, we see a glimpse of a priesthood that transcends human lineage and points directly to the heart of God's eternal plan. The centuries rolled on. Israel's rebellion deepened. The prophets cried louder, and the divine silence between the Old and New Testaments loomed. But in this seeming silence, God was preparing the most profound revelation of all time, the incarnation of His Word. And so it was. In the fullness of time, Jesus of Nazareth walked into the pages of history not merely as a prophet, not merely as a teacher, but as the living embodiment of the Scriptures. John declared it with piercing clarity. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. The Bible had always pointed to Him. Every sacrifice, every prophecy, every psalm and proverb was a shadow of the one to come. He didn't just quote Scripture. He fulfilled it. He was it. The wilderness temptation. He defeated the devil by quoting Deuteronomy. The Sermon on the Mount. He revealed the true spirit of the law. The cross. It echoed Isaiah 53 in every lash, every cry, every drop of blood. Even in death, Jesus quoted the Psalms. My God, why have you forsaken me? And after the resurrection, He opened the minds of His disciples, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, explaining how the entire Scripture testified about Himself. But the revelation didn't end at Calvary. With the resurrection came the outpouring of the Spirit, and suddenly, the Word was not just written, it was alive within believers. The early church exploded not because of political power or military force, but because they carried the living revelation of God. They didn't have a completed New Testament yet, but they had the Spirit and the testimony of Jesus. They preached the Word, not from parchment, but from fire in their bones. And here lies the mystery. Even today, in a world saturated with digital texts and theological debates, the true revelation of the Bible still waits to be unlocked, not by intellect alone, but by the Spirit. You can study Scripture endlessly, argue its doctrines, quote its verses, and still miss its heartbeat. Because the Bible is not just a history book, it is a living revelation of God's redemptive plan, and you are a part of that story. When you read Scripture, do you merely seek information or transformation? When you hear the Word, do you just memorize it, or does it move you? This is the revelation of the Bible. God did not just write a book. He wrote Himself into history, into flesh, and into your heart, and He is still speaking. You've just seen one chapter of God's eternal plan, but the story continues. Don't let it end here. Share this message. Subscribe to walk deeper into revelation. And remember, what is hidden in the Word is revealed to those who seek with faith. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your heart aligned, for the Bible revealed is only just beginning.